candidate.
Good evening, I'm Troy Johnson. Welcome to our conversation with the candidates. This program is part of our commitment to you, to keep you updated on the candidates in this year's election so you can make an informed decision on Election Day. Our conversation begins with Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. Delbert Hosemann is Mississippi's 33rd Lieutenant Governor, and he's running for re-election. He is also the former Secretary of State, holding that position for over 10 years. First of all, let's start with the basics. Let's start with your background.
Okay.
Tell us about it. Who is Delbert Hosemann, and what has he done to deserve Mississippians' vote?
Well, we go way back, as they say. You know, my father's buried here, his father's, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. We've all been in Mississippi a long time, grew up in Vicksburg, fished on Eagle Lake growing up, just like everybody else, I guess, in Mississippi during our growing up times. Went off to college and got a law degree, came back here, went in the Army, came back here and started working on a practice, married and 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Mm-hmm. So the normal, I guess the most normal kind of thing. We've been married 52 years and really excited about having the opportunity to serve. We actually looked at running previously when a Republican seat came up in 1981. Mm-hmm. There was like a convention, and I lost in like the 3rd ballot, so I started running on the Republican ticket in 1981. In 1998, I got the nomination for Congress for our district, and got beat by Ronnie Shouse as a Democrat in a tough race. And then in 2008, we went on and were hired to be Secretary of State, and we stayed there 12 years, did voter ID. We did about $1 billion for public education through 16th section land. That's the section that state owns for education throughout Mississippi, except for the northern counties. So we did that, and we rewrote all the business laws. You see these LLC laws and corporate laws, and so that's what I did. I was a business lawyer. Mm-hmm. So it kind of let me in the Fox house, and I rewrote all the laws of Mississippi, all the business laws of Mississippi, and I was really pleased to do that. We wrote the law about autism, to have an autism committee and also be covered by insurance. We have an autistic grandchild. So we were heavily involved in that, and then when the lieutenant governor's thing opened up, we asked to be hired for that, and we were lucky enough to be hired, and we've had probably the best 4 years in Mississippi history. If you want to go into it, I'll go into what we did in the last 4 years.
Absolutely.
Well, we started by cutting the budget. And Troy, that's really important. People kind of forget things. You know, how'd you get to where you had money? Mm-hmm. We cut the budget by 2% my first year, and that's about $120 million. And then we had COVID. Everybody forgets about COVID, and that was just horrific for everybody. I had it, and everybody else had it, and the session went on forever till October, actually. Then we started hitting our stride on the things that I wanted to do. We passed an education bill, $1,000 a year. Then we passed $5,000 a year raises for teachers. This past year, we put $100 million in education in Mississippi, in the classroom, not in the principals or the superintendents. We did a building contractor arrangement. We did these coaches, these career coaches for the last 2 years. This year there'll be like 120 or more of them that will go into high schools and take kids that may have some question about where they're going or what they're going to do with their lives, and give them the opportunities to get a collegiate degree or maybe get a skill. And those have proven tremendously successful. I listened to 5 of them in Pontotoc the other day in New Albany, and they were just unbelievable what they had done and how they listed, like they had 72 kids and every one of them had a career path. And I just have been so impressed with the fact we've got these career coaches. Mm-hmm. Then we did infrastructure last year, about $2.3 billion. We did $600 million in infrastructure that hadn't ever been done. The people in the programs call it capacity. That's new to me. So we did $2.3 billion additional new projects in Mississippi, and then maintenance. And we're funding these out into 2025. So they'll be constructed through 28. So we're actually funding 2 and 3 years out now from the money that we had. Gotcha. Then we did the largest tax cut in Mississippi history. It's $525 million. We'll go to 4% over the next 2 years. We'll be at 4% in 2026, and we'll be one of the lowest tax states that charge income tax, of the 41 or so that do. We'll be like 5th or 6th in the country. So we've lowered taxes all the way down. And then I guess the thing that people don't talk about much, Troy, we paid off $500 million in state debt. Now that has never been done in the history of Mississippi. We always borrowed money for the new aluminum mill. We didn't borrow any money for that. For the new projects or whatever, we haven't borrowed any money in 2 years. And other than the bonds for these obligations we hadn't borrowed any money to subsist on. And so we paid off 12% of the state's debt. And what that means, now that interest rates have gone up to 6 or 8% or whatever they are now, that saves us, I would say $30 million in interest that we were sending to New York. I can send it to education or infrastructure. So I thought it was really important that we did those, and there's a bunch of others. Yeah. You let me go for a little bit. So
I did. I wanted you to, because you talk about a lot of accomplishments. You talk about years of service. Why are you running now? What makes this race so important to you, another 4 years as lieutenant governor in the state?
Because we haven't finished with education, infrastructure, and taxes. Those are the big three. I've got 8 grandchildren. I want them to grow up in Mississippi just like we did. You know, I want them to have the same opportunities we had. And we are pressing hard on lowering our taxes further. We've got money in the bank. This year we had money over our budget again. Education continues to be the #1 thing. That's the best thing we've got is a child's brain. We don't have enough special ed teachers here. We don't have enough people dealing with mental health here. We don't have enough that we've devoted to education in Mississippi, hundreds of thousands of children. So I'm very interested in that. We changed some of our adoption laws, but we haven't. There are over 4,000 children in our custody right now. There's human trafficking going on within 10 miles of where we're sitting today. You know, and I want that to stop. And I want to have the ability to be able to have laws and mandatory sentencing, some of the things we did this year, to have laws to protect people. So, no, we're just getting started on taxes and infrastructure and education and things like that. And I feel very comfortable. I've got a vision where Mississippi ought to be.
Gotcha.
And I think we've got the talent to get the aggregate group together to do it.
Gotcha. You talked about the education, talked about infrastructure. Another big issue that kind of falls in infrastructure is the Jackson water system. You live here, you've experienced it like we all have. What's your take on the methods that are now being taken to try to get the Jackson water system up and running and much better than it has been?
Well, first of all, the federal government has devoted about $800 million to it. And there was a federal court case filed about a month or two ago, and Judge Wingate issued his opinion Friday. And in that opinion, he basically approved the individual that's running the water system here. He said he was doing a good job. Ted Henderson. That he's doing a good job, that he had stopped leaks, that he had started to get the billing out. I mean, he was pretty specific in his court order. There had been some individuals from the city that had objected to certain parts of what he was doing. And we're supporting that. I think he's doing a better job. I think we're doing better. We've got a long way to go. He had $800 million. I'm glad it wasn't state money. I'm glad it was the federal government. But in the end, we're going to have to stand on our own 2 feet. When he gets this back going, this past year we passed legislation that allowed for really a kind of a regional concept to be around here. And that was defeated in the House. And there may be a better idea to do that, but in the end, we're going to have to start back to billing and fixing, and our sewer's under federal court order now, our jail's under federal court order now. And one of my pet peeves, we don't have a city jail. There's no jail in Jackson. I've lost count of the number of murders. So I think there are things that we need to do better here. On the water situation, I think he's doing a good job. He had a pretty bad hand when he started, and it's improving.
Well, how long do you think, you know, I'm sure that there is some communication between the water department and the state in terms of keeping the state abreast of what's happening. How long do you think it's going to take before this system is really working optimally?
I've had one conversation when he came here, but I have had no conversation since then. So I don't have a timetable for you. I don't know. I read the court order that it was issued, I think, Friday, and it seems like he's making progress. I don't have any time frame for that. But eventually, I mean, it was broken for years. Eventually, we're going to have to stand on our own 2 feet. We're going to have to pay our bills, fix our own water, make sure our sewage doesn't pollute the Pearl River.
Right. Let's go back to election security just quickly. You know, prior to being Lieutenant Governor, you were Secretary of State. You spent a lot of time dealing with issues of election security. Now, you're no longer in that position, but that's something that people are still concerned about. What information do you have for people who are worried about their vote being secure?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that you'd say it is.
I do. And none of the machines, and Secretary Watson can answer these as well, he's been there now 3 years or 4 years, none of the machines are connected to the internet. So there's no way for them to get hacked unless somebody goes in front of, I don't know how many poll workers in every polling booth and some managers in every polling booth and pulls them out and does something to them. So I don't think that we have a problem with your vote being counted. Where we have a problem is not casting it. Now you'll look, we got a big primary coming August the 8th. That's what you're interviewing us about. It'll be surprising if we get 20% of the people out. I mean, either Democrats or Republicans. And so it's very difficult to go to that part. Everybody should cast your ballot. I am very comfortable that those machines work and that they're not being hacked. And our results will be what you cast your ballot on. The biggest risk you got is not voting. So go vote, and I feel comfortable with that, and I'm sure Secretary Watson would say the same now that he's looked at it.
Do you think it's the tone of the conversations that have been happening in our body politic right now about, you know, these negative comments about, oh, my vote is not secure? Do you think that has driven down voter enthusiasm in general?
Without a question. There's all kinds of discussions about this or that happened somewhere, and you know, I'll leave that up to wherever it was. I can't talk about what happened in Pennsylvania or someplace, but I can talk about Mississippi. And I think Mississippi was accurate in its count. And President Trump won here, and I think it was accurate in the count that we had. I think our count will be accurate on August the 8th and again in November when we elect our statewide officials for the next 4 years.
Okay. Let me ask you about the education modified school calendar. You've been a proponent of more school districts adopting this modified calendar. Clinton Public School District has done that. First in the metro. What would you say to other districts considering this possibility? And do you think other districts will jump on board?
I do. And I started on this in Corinth, which is kind of where this was all birthed. And I went back there year after year, looking at their process and looking at their scores, looking at their kids. I sat in a room with their teachers and I said, what's wrong with this kind of modified calendar? And that's 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, Christmas and Thanksgiving, 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and about 5 or 6 weeks in the summer. And so I said, what's wrong with this? Nothing. And the teachers sat me in a room with about 10 or 15 of them in a circle, and they said, by March, we're sick of these kids. They were honest. And so we need a break, and we recharge our batteries in October, and we recharge, and we're better teachers for this. And I thought that was interesting. Then I went to Gulfport, which has also adopted this, Petal, Lamar County, the university towns, Madison is going to this. So it's a decision being made by parents and teachers on what's the best to educate their children. That's wonderful. So I went to Gulfport, Troy, and sat in these things in the summer. Those intercession periods, those 3 weeks where kids catch up if they were behind or take a little accelerated course if they wanted to. I think there were 1,200 kids in there out of probably 4,000 or 5,000 in Superintendent East's district. And we have kids come into school that may have not had something available to them. And they're in a learning environment, they're safe, being fed. I mean, it's good. This is a good thing. And so this period, these intercession periods are really gonna help us generationally, to me. So this year we passed that $100 million we put in for the schools, and we're hopeful that the schools that need that money will use it. To give you an example, in Lamar County, they tested this. They asked the teachers and the parents, what do you think about this after 2 years of doing this? It cost about $200,000 a year for that school district. Now it's got like 18 schools, it's got a bunch of schools, so it's got a lot of transportation. 82% favorable and 85% favorable. by teachers and parents. I mean, that's off the chart to get people to agree to that. So I'm hopeful. They're about 30, and I hope by the end of my next 4 years that over half of Mississippi, and hopefully eventually, if parents and teachers think that's the right way to go, I hope eventually we'll see it all.
Gotcha. Let's switch to healthcare. That's been a big topic here in the state of Mississippi. Is there a plan to tackle hospital closures and also the situation with Medicaid? People are looking for accessibility, affordability, and quality care, and in many places, honestly, in the state, you just can't get it.
That's correct. And we have been to every hospital from South Haven, Baptist South Haven, to Singing River and Pascagoula. We were in New Albany yesterday. We'll be in a hospital again tomorrow. We've been going to nurses and doctors and hospital administrators asking what you do. Greenwood was losing about $1.5 million a month. You're right. And that's after they had moved some of their OB work to Grenada. So you're right, we have some capacity issues, we have access issues. So this last year, we passed a bill that for nurses, if you stay in Mississippi for 5 years, we'll pay your debt off $6,000 a year. We'll pay your student debt off to get more nurses to stay in our state. We did the same thing with doctors to get more doctors. Now, we've got problems with pharmaceutical, we got problems with mental health. Our independent pharmacists are struggling. And I finally got a list from one of the pharmacists, not any names or anything, what they were paying for drugs and what they were getting reimbursed. They're getting hurt. I mean, they're paying more than they're giving us when you come to the window and get it from them. So we have mental health issues, we have pharmaceutical issues, hospital issues, nurses, doctors, the whole market needs to be looked at. So you should anticipate this fall we will start. On the Senate side, I always like to do conferences and committees, so just like we did for adoptions and babies this last time. We'll do one beginning this fall to look at everything from pharmacies out to mental health. We got mental health problems in schools, and I was with teachers in Bay St. Louis just this last week. So you'll see us dealing with mental health from young people to more senior. You'll see us dealing with the high cost of drugs. You're going to see us doing hospitals and how they should look and how they should be available. I don't think anybody ought to be more than 30 minutes away from an emergency room. So I want our cone to be close on emergency rooms. Then I got to have it staffed by nurses and doctors. Then I got to make sure you can get the medicine when you leave there.
Yeah. So is Medicaid expansion off the table? Is that a third rail that nobody's willing to touch? Is there going to be a real conversation about that? Because often they say that's essentially sending $1 billion back to the federal government that we're not using in this state that would be helpful in a variety of ways. Every administrator that I've told you, and every hospital I've been in, from Forest General to Tupelo, I mean, I've been in these places. Every one of them tells me that expansion will not solve the issue. Now, I have to listen to the people that are running the things, not so much me. Certainly there'll be some monetary help to them of one side or another. But the way to go at this is the way I go at just about everything. We need to have our hearings and determine the scope of care in every community. What is the healthcare scope of care that should be there? Where should we be in that community? Then we need to go look and see if it's there or not there, and how do we fund that? Now, the funding really comes after you determine what you need. Not so much we just pour money in a leaky bucket. Then they've all told me, and 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, we'd be back having the same conversation. So we have to have some standard of care and some locations and some capacity discussions, as well as pharmaceutical and mental health. You'll see all of that. Okay. You will see that this time. Could that potentially also mean, from the capacity standpoint, attracting other hospital companies into our state, that run systems in other places? Is that
well, that's already happened. Baptist has like 10 or 12 different hospitals, from Oxford all over to New Albany. Singing River and is under a contract with Our Lady of the Lakes and that owns St. Dominic's in Jackson. Ochsner's has relationships with Meridian and in Hancock County. So all of this is already happening, Troy. You're seeing these other hospitals. I'd like to cut my checks to Mississippi hospitals. Sure. And so we're hopeful, though, that this will end up with some of a hub and spokes type thing.
Gotcha.
We also passed a law this year to allow community hospitals to merge together both their assets and their medical staffs. And that's happening just now south here in Simpson County today. So you'll see some local hospitals getting together to cut costs, and then I think you'll probably see some regional hospitals like we're seeing right now.
Gotcha. Can't talk about healthcare without talking about the abortion situation here. Roe v. Wade overturned last year. The state's only abortion clinic that was in Jackson is no more. The state says it wants to combat infant mortality rates as well as the mortality rate of pregnant women here in Mississippi. How does the state see those things? How do we see better outcomes for babies and moms in this situation?
We have been talking with Dr. Edney at the Department of Health about this issue. If we are going to be the pro-life state that we are, thank God, then we need to be able to cover you from pregnancy. We have a lot of problem pregnancies, and that leads to, thank goodness for Blair Batson, that leads to the Blair Batsons of the work where we take care of these premature babies. If you go in there, they're not any bigger than your hand. Yeah. And they struggle even to live and breathe. And it's just, we can do better. Now, I've asked Dr. Edney, and he's supposed to report to us this fall on what the steps would be for pregnancy centers and delivery centers and outreach centers and all those other things that we have, resource centers and all those that have in Mississippi, and we want to coordinate that effort. We can do better there. There's a lot of information work that needs to be done, but there's also some medical work that needs to be done. Then this year we worked on adoption processes, which have taken way too long. There's some other things in that genre from when they actually come. We have baby box legislation now. If you don't want your baby, you can basically drop him or her off, no questions asked, at a baby box in like fire stations and stuff. So we're trying to keep the ones that get here the ability to live here and be adopted and prayerfully raised. So
there needs to be more funding in those systems that kind of overarch and care for children.
That is a given to me. I mean, we are going to support those that are now allowed enough to cry and the ones that aren't out of the womb yet, and we are going to support that in Mississippi. We are going to do better. Our infant mortality rate is too high. Our mama's mortality rate is too high. Our babies are sicker than they need to be. So what happens when they get to start their kindergarten and stuff? They're not healthy enough. So it runs the whole gamut from when they're in the womb all the way through graduation, and we can do better. We will do better.
Okay. Women's sports have been also in the public eye lately. The governor has talked about this in some of his campaign ads. Some are saying it's a solution in search of a problem, though. Have there been any instances of males who've transitioned playing women's sports in Mississippi? And secondly, why such an effort to pour so much energy into preventing this? And then thirdly, should there be legislation for the opposite to stop women who've transitioned from competing in men's sports?
You know, this is one of those you want to ask, why are we here? As you can look at my resume, I've run a bunch of marathons, a New York Marathon, the half marathons around here forever, and all kinds of races from the Gulf Coast half marathon up here. We've run all over. I get more comments from females at these races that come up to me at I don't do the long ones anymore, but the 5Ks and stuff, and they'll say, don't you dare let a man compete in my district. I've been running against Susie or whomever, and I want to continue to run against them. So it's been my personal experience that women want to race against women. And whatever the competition is, the World Cup is on right now. And there are women from all over the world competing at a very high level, much better than I would ever dream of being. And I think that should be the way it is. I think biological is the way it ought to be. And so I don't have any trepidation about passing that bill this year. I'm hopeful that we never have that question. You know, I'm hopeful that this is something that people have raised to make an issue. I've got other issues for the healthcare of babies and education and infrastructure and taxes and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I think we've dealt with that, and I don't see any change.
Let's quickly talk about the campaign tone here. It's a far cry from you sitting on your bench being called the wrong name all the time. It seems to, there have been attack ads from your opponent, Chris McDaniel. How do you respond to being characterized by some as a Republican in name only? And will you have to respond with attack ads of your own? How do you feel about that in the campaign?
Not good, and I'll tell you why. Of course, I've been running on the Republican side since 1981. My opponent was like 9 years old when I started, so I don't know, he must have missed a couple of generations there. He actually voted in the Democratic primary one time in 2003, so it's kind of hard. I was being a Republican 20 years before that, and when it wasn't popular necessarily to be a Republican in Mississippi, Democrats control most of the state by then. So no, it's disappointing, and because we have a record that's entirely the opposite. But the most damaging thing to this, Troy, is the tone of those kinds of attacks. Now, there's no basis for those things, and there's no positive, I would like a higher this or a lower that. There's no real issues that's being raised in those attack ads. It's all he did this or he didn't do this or whatever. It's all about the other candidate. And in fact, I expect in his political career, my opponent has raised more money to attack Republicans than any Democrat ever has. And that violates the Reagan rule, and I'm hopeful that most people who offer themselves for public service have a good heart. I mean, we really do. We're just trying to do better. You may not agree. I work really hard. You know, I'm down at the Capitol probably 6 days a week, and I get paid part-time, but I work hard. And we try to do the right thing. I don't say I do the right thing every time, but it wasn't because I didn't try. And when you do this, you get the next guy or the next lady, and she says, man, I'm not getting into that. And I'm not getting into that for a supervisor or a House race or a Senate race or a governor or lieutenant governor race.
Gotcha.
So I think the negative advertising hurts generational, particularly when you don't have anything to say in your own merit. So it's only 2 weeks left. We'll see, and then we'll move on.
Give me the 15-second elevator pitch for voting for Delbert Hosemann on August 8th.
Well, we've had the best 4 years in the history of Mississippi. Paying off debt, education, infrastructure, you go down the list, everything that we've done from children to adoption to whatever. And I intend to continue that. I've got a record. I'm gonna work hard at it. And I got a vision for Mississippi. And I've got 8 grandchildren. And they're all gonna wanna live right here in Mississippi when we get through the next 4 years.
All right. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann.
Thank you, Troy. It's good to see you, man.
Appreciate it. We introduce you to a first-timer to politics, and she's running for lieutenant governor. Her platform and why she's running after the break. Welcome back. Another candidate in the lieutenant governor's race is Tiffany Longino. Longino is an educator. She has said the state needs to focus on improving health care and education outcomes. This is Longino's first time running for office. Let's start with tell me more about your background and why you are in this race.
So I'm in this race, you know, I get that question a lot, and why not start on the local level? What I want to do is at the state level. And what I mean by that is being able to draft effective legislation for everyone. And that's why I'm in this race, because drafting legislation, we know that comes from the state level. I've been noticing a piece that has been missing with the Republican Party, and that is effective, equitable, and equal legislation. So I figured if I start at the state level, then I can make a difference there.
Gotcha. And your background?
My background is in education, I'm sorry. I've been an educator almost about 18 years. And I think when you're sitting in a classroom, and as I have done, I've taught in places like Florida, Chicago, rural Mississippi, you see a different student every day as far as diversity, right? And so when you see different students, you see the need of every different person. And I think that's one of the things that qualify me to run in this race.
Gotcha. You have been vocal on the campaign trail about taxes. Most people are in favor of cutting taxes, but you think it's important not to do that. Why?
No, that's not true. I am an advocate of cutting taxes. Let me explain when I say the income tax. You're speaking of the income tax and the grocery tax. So here's my thing, and this is how I look at it. Income tax. We know that one of our highest revenues in the state of Mississippi is our income tax and our grocery tax. So if you cut the income tax and if you cut the grocery tax, then where would the money for the state come from? That means if you're cutting these highest paid revenues in our state, you have to increase other taxes. I tell people all the time, just because it sounds good doesn't mean it's good. And think about it like this. If you do have to pay at the end of the year, that is one time that you have to pay, as opposed to if you raise another tax, that's going to be every day and every month. So before we cut the income tax or fine or reallocate funding, which I plan to do for the grocery tax, let's show the public what plan we have in place that will supplement for our income tax and our grocery tax. So I'm in favor for it if we have a reasonable plan, if we can allocate or reallocate fundings to supplement that lost revenue.
Gotcha. Can you give a little idea of what you would do as Lieutenant Governor?
Absolutely. So when I think of the grocery tax, I want people to know that we have what you call gross domestic product, right? And so what gross domestic product is the gross that the state puts out. So since our highest gross domestic product in the state of Mississippi is agriculture, we bring in about $9.7 billion in agriculture. I would allocate and reallocate funding from that agriculture side, that GDP, which is gross domestic product, reallocate funding from agriculture, use that funding to cut the grocery tax. But you know, I can say what I can do all day long. It would be up to my party and the other party to vote for that, but that would be my plan.
Gotcha. And what kind of feedback have you gotten from voters as you talk about that?
You know, I haven't heard anything thus far, but I will tell you this. When I was in Neshoba County this past weekend, I had a person from Chris McDaniel team and also Deborah Holzman team. They were honest, and that's fine. They said, hey, you know, we are going to vote for Chris McDaniel, and another person said, hey, I'm going to vote for Deborah Holzman, but we love your plan. And I'm fine with that. That lets me know that I'm doing a great job. You get, if anytime I have two of my constituents, people say, hey, we love your plan. But you know, they're devoted to them, and that's fine. So I haven't really heard too much about it, but with those two, I think that was good within itself.
So it's something that you'll continue to push out there on the campaign trail.
Most definitely.
Let's talk about healthcare now. The topic of healthcare, it's been surfacing during this race. Unlike most Republicans, your view on healthcare is a little bit different, along with Medicaid. Explain why.
Well, let me say this. Actually, 70% of Republicans in the House did